Are you a good loser?
I'm not a good loser. I don't like to lose. I don't lose too often. I don't like to lose.
But are you gracious?
You don't know until you see. It depends. I think mail-in voting is going to rig the election. I really do.
Can you give a direct answer? You will accept the election?
I have to see. Look, I have to see. No, I'm not going to just say yes. I'm not going to say no. And I didn't last time either.
Another alarming obliteration of presidential and democratic norms that should not be allowed to fade into the noise of today's news cycle. Donald Trump sowing doubt about the outcome of an election that hasn't happened yet, as polls continue to show him trailing his opponent, Joe Biden, by gaping margins. The latest from the Washington Post and ABC News shows Biden up nationally by 15 points, a gap that's widened by 5 points since May. For Trump, it's a political crisis largely of his own making. That same polling shows Americans reject his response to the pandemic and his frequent efforts to downplay a virus that has killed 140,000 Americans. On the question of which candidate voters trust more to handle the virus, Joe Biden now has a 20-point lead over Donald Trump. They were almost neck and neck on the same question back in March. Joining us now, MSNBC legal analyst who worked with the SDNY Civil Division, our friend Maya Wiley, and former top State Department official, our friend Rick Stengel. I have been dying to talk to you, Rick Stengel, because you and I have started this conversation about what if he doesn't leave? And I know I've shared this before, that I spoke to a former senior military official who says that you can bet your last dollar there are conversations within the military about what to do, but it's not something that they would have broached with this White House as of yet. Maybe Trump is accelerating that process?
Yes, I mean, it's the most chilling and diabolical thing I think a president has ever said. And as you and I have talked about this, I think the republic has to be prepared. The military has to be prepared. Congress has to be prepared for an American president to not accept the results of a presidential election. That would be the greatest political crisis we've ever had in our country. That would undermine the democratic norms that we've all abided by for a couple of hundred years. So my brain finds it hard to comprehend. And of course, he was trying to put the election last time. He thought he was going to lose. He wanted to be able to say that it was rigged. And he's doing the same thing now, although now he is a sitting president.
Maya, I struggle with this personally. At the beginning, they were misstatements, they were distortions, they were flat out lies from before he started. And now we have a count, and now we call them out. At the beginning, he was caught on Access Hollywood talking, saying, I think Melania called it locker room talk. It was the language of a sexual predator. I mean, we have shied away from saying what we see because we can't believe our eyes. And I wonder if in that gap between what we see and what we hear, and the minute it takes us to get our bearings, he continues to sort of move the goalposts. I mean, to say this in a Sunday show interview, I may or may not accept the result of an election in what was once the greatest democracy on the planet, should be an international headline.
Absolutely. Donald Trump is desperate, and desperate men do desperate things. It makes him very dangerous. He's been a danger to our democracy since day one. Lying as the commander-in-chief in and of itself is dangerous. But now we're looking at a president who has, is by avoiding the truth about the coronavirus, by stoking fear and hate, we now have 140,000 Americans who have lost their lives. And we have a country with so many states with out-of-control, coronavirus infections. That is the kind of thing that he can't lie his way out of. And so what we see is desperation. And that desperation from Donald Trump usually ends in distraction. The distractions themselves are extremely dangerous for democracy. Calling, for example, in advance the sanctity of our elections, suggesting that things that we know to be true, which is that mail-in balloting is pretty safe, yet he says it's going to be fraudulent. I mean, these are all distractions that serve to pull us away from the facts that he can't run from, and to stoke fear. And I think that what we have to do is keep our eyes on what matters most to society, and that's us. That's the people of this country. That's our health. That's our safety. And we have to demand that our leaders call their attention to these important issues.
So to that end, Rick Stengel, Joe Biden issued this statement. Mr. President, your ignorance isn't a virtue or a sign of your strength. It's undercutting our response to this unprecedented crisis at every turn, and it's costing Americans their jobs and their lives. It's long past due for President Trump to listen to somebody other than himself in how to fight this virus, because after 6 straight months of deadly mismanagement, it is spiraling even more out of control. Two-part question for you. Do you agree that we're sort of at this fork of the road where we're about to drop off into something worse than where we are? And two, if that assessment is right, and I think it is, how bizarre that Donald Trump's answer is to restart the briefings that put in motion the collapse of his poll numbers.
There's about 16 parts to that question, Nicolle. I do think that, and I'm not.
You can handle it.
Okay. My brain is thinking. I can't. I'm not a doctor. I can't speak for what's happening. It does seem like it's not that we're going through a second wave, but that parts of the country are going through a first wave for the first time, and that areas that did go through a first wave, like New York, may have a resurgence because people are not taking it quite as seriously as they did. I mean, what I find so disturbing about this moment in time, and I'm going to use what's going on in Portland as an example. Donald Trump has it exactly in reverse. You should use local and state officials to do whatever they need to do about a demonstration, which is a constitutionally protected right that our founders put in there so they could protest against unfair policies and dictators. And you should be using the federal government to do testing and create PPE. And he's got it exactly backwards. He's telling the states to do testing and deal with the virus. And he, as the federal government, is saying, yeah, I'm going to go in and put in unmarked troops there, like Vladimir Putin in Crimea, and deal with that. So he is the most incompetent president in American history. And what's particularly dangerous is if he starts to use something like Portland as his kind of Reichstag fire to use that to declare martial law, to send other troops in other parts of the country and say, hey, this whole thing with free speech and the free press isn't working under the circumstances. That's the real danger. And that's what we've seen throughout history where authoritarians take power.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.